Hello, I'm Dean Whiting, Pathology Technology Australia, and this COVIDeocast is part 2 of the little mini-series we're doing on COVID-19 antigens and the antigen test. In part 1, I explained a little bit more about what antigens are, how they stimulate the formation of antibodies in the body, and how we might be able to test COVID-19 antigens as a way of getting Australians safely back to work, back to our lives, back to our healthcare plans maybe, and back to and our economy back on track. In this part 2, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the test itself, how it will work, how it could be applied, and what are some of the limitations we'd need to take care of. So in part 1, the antigen, we know that the antigen is the stimulator for antibodies in the body. We know that there are several formats of the test which are becoming available. The laboratory format, being able to measure antigens in samples at large laboratories, but also the rapid test, the lateral flow test, a little bit like, say, the pregnancy test you would have seen in pharmacies. For this test, we can take a swab from the back of the nose or throat, or potentially a saliva sample, and this goes into a little bottle of liquid, buffer, and a drop of that buffer goes onto a lateral flow stick test. It's a card, and within 15, maybe 20 minutes, half an hour at the absolute most, we have a result. So how could this test be used? Well, in the first place, it would be very, very useful in healthcare facilities, in aged care facilities, anywhere where there are critical workers who need to be able to do their jobs safely. We may be able to then test these individuals, these workers, ahead of their shift, ahead of going into sites, and we would be able to pick up active cases of COVID-19 and act appropriately. So that means then we could isolate people, we could rapidly get onto contact tracing. But there are other places in which we could use this test, potentially in manufacturing. We know already, of the cases in manufacturing where workers work closely together. In meat processing works, for example, in warehousing, in handling parcels and mail. So we may be able to use them here where entering a work site, we have the test. We would quickly then know if somebody is infected, then to be able to take the appropriate action, notify the authorities, be able to isolate that individual, and be able to initiate contact tracing. There's another important application this test might be useful for, and that is for air travel. Getting people safely back onto travel plans, across borders, where we could test ahead of a flight, like you would with the check-in process and the security process at the airport, and quickly have a result to be clear to fly or not. Now, these tests aren't perfect. No test is, not even the PCR test. So we do have to take care that on occasions, rarely, these tests may not detect a positive. But we have other ways that we could potentially mitigate, and that is by taking, at the same time as the test, taking some clinical symptoms as well. So looking at the individual's body temperature would do, finding out about current symptoms, is the person symptom-free, and also has the person had any known contacts in the last 4 or 5 days. So taking some of these symptoms at the same time might help mitigate. A lateral flow antibody test might also help at the same time. So an antibody test would potentially show antibodies in a late phase infection, and we could use that as an opportunity to double up on detection of a case. So these are the COVID-19 antigen tests. This is where some of them might be able to be used to get Australians safely back to work, to their lives, and to the economy running again. In the next part of our COVID-19 mini-series, we'll talk a little bit more about how we could combine these tests with, say, some smart mobile phone applications to manage the information coming from these tests. I'm Dean Whiting, Pathology Technology Australia.